Welcome to the Knicks Film School Postgame Show presented by BetUS. DJ Zullo here, coming to you moments after, unfortunately, another drubbing at the hands of the Boston Celtics. Opening night, 132 to 109. Final score. Tonight, 131 to 104. And if you didn't think so prior to the game, if you thought the Knicks were in the class of this Boston Celtics team, you look at the standings and they're separated by a game or two. And based on how the Celtics have played over the past month and a half, 2 months, a little stale, although signs that they were coming out of it. You could have argued and made a compelling case that the Knicks were on the same level as this Celtics team, the defending champions. And I think what tonight proved is that the chasm between these two teams right now is a mile long. And there are many reasons for that, and we'll get into a lot of them. There are certainly, micro issues and concerns, valid concerns you can have about coaching decisions, about individual player performances. To me right now, I think we need to just sit and understand that this Celtics team was playing without Kristaps Porzingis, who, in my opinion, is the reason why this team can get to the truly elite level. This team was not playing with Jrue Holiday. Still a really effective basketball player at this stage. And yes, I know OG Anunoby wasn't playing. I know Mitchell Robinson, we're still waiting for him to make his return. But I think right now, the talent gap of these two teams is enormous. And if you can boil it down to one sort of action sequence that happened time and time again tonight, was the Celtics relentlessly attacking Jalen Brunson, who I will spend time to give an immense amount of credit for his performance tonight. But they were also attacking Karl Anthony Towns. And let's call a spade a spade. There's been too many games against great defensive teams where Karl Anthony Towns has been reduced to a good basketball player. He hasn't been the all-NBA, starting all-star, potential MVP, top 5 finisher against the truly great defensive teams. And you can sit here and tell me that there's a lot of coaching involved in the fact that he has not been at the level he needs to be. And yes, he was on the injury report today, and I'm sure that played a factor in some of his issues tonight. That knee probably hampered him a little bit. But this happened the first Boston game. This happened the first Oklahoma City game. This happened in the first Houston game, the first Cleveland game, where teams have the way to go against this man and allow themselves to effectively take what has been one of the most effective actions in the NBA, the Brunson Cat 2-man game, and remove it from the playbook. Now process that for a moment. The Knicks have two elite offensive players that are perfectly synergistic, that play off each other, that are additives to each other. And against certain teams, and it's not the entire NBA, we're talking about only 3 to 4 teams. But those 3 to 4 teams can effectively remove Karl Anthony Towns from the equation in terms of him being that elite all-NBA offensive player. And we saw it again today, where Cat was spacing, which is a huge impact on an offense. He had some post-ups. Celtics doubled a few times. Many times they would just play him straight up. He had some offensive rebounds and some putback attempts. He was able to put his mark on the game on offense, but make no mistake about it, he is just not an elite offensive player against these teams. And the biggest red flag for me is that I don't think there's a great solution to remedy this. He's not going to all of a sudden turn into Jokic in the post and punish mismatches. His ball handling, while truly effective for a player his size, especially against opposing centers, limits him in terms of his self-creation. Although he did have a couple of self-created threes in this game, impressive shots, but certainly not a shot diet that he can go to time in and time again. So where do we go here? Because for the Knicks to get to where they need to get to, they're going to have to go through Boston, in my opinion. And I don't have the confidence standing right here, February the 8th, 2025, after that game, that they could figure out a way to turn the tide against a specific matchup. And there were some, this might sound crazy, but I thought there were some things on the defensive side of the ball that might be things to carry over into the next matchup. But to stick with Karl Anthony Towns, the offense, just not the impact required to be a great offense. And then on defense, Cat at the level, right? We've been talking about, you can't play Cat and drop. He has to hedge. He has to be up at the level. He has to impact the ball at the screen level. Every single time it felt like Cat was at the level, Tatum was going around him. Auto, paint touch, driving kick, open three. So you can tell me that there's things the coach can do to mitigate the problems Cat can bring against a specific matchup. But what are they? They're going to bring him into the action, and now you can drop him, and Tatum can walk into open threes. You can bring him closer to the level. And with those screens being set as far out as they are, at 30 feet, Tatum with the runway, Cat in motion in a poor defensive stance, which has been a problem all year. Left to right crossover, and Tatum is in the paint. So where do we go from here if we're trying to get to the NBA Finals? And the likelihood is they're going to have to go through this Boston team, which has, in 2 games, run the Knicks out of the building. And I'm sorry, a lot of that falls on the shoulders of the man you traded Julius Randle and Dante DiVincenzo for. That is going to be making upwards of $60 million in the next couple of seasons. We have to set the expectation that the team requires him to be better. I don't think you can walk into the next time they play the Celtics and say, well, the coach can drum up some fancy X's and O's actions for Cat to get some really cool post-ups and dives to the rim and open threes and figure out other ways to do it. That sounds great, and you can make that case, but I don't buy it. Like, if you're going to be guarded by Jason Tatum and some of these other wings that teams have consistently put on him, like, be the 7-footer you are and punish that matchup. And I just have so much skepticism right now that he is capable, skill-wise, physically, mentally, to be able to do that. Because I don't think that's how he's naturally wired. I don't think he's wired to be that type of big. The type of big he is the versatile all-NBA player that he's been. And against 90% of the NBA, that's an unguardable proposition. But it's almost like boggles the mind that there are just some teams that can reduce him in such a drastic, in such a stark manner. And I rattle those teams off. And the Celtics are, from the head coach to the personnel on the court, they are the most terrifying of defenses And yes, the presence of Josh Hart does make that proposition easier. And I have been as big a proponent of Josh Hart in this starting lineup as anyone in the Knicks content creation space. He has had a fantastic year, but has to be, if I'm to be fair, you have to link him with Cat in terms of the struggles Cat has been dealing with. I don't think the answer is to remove Josh Hart from the starting lineup in a general sense. But if you're going to tell me tonight that there's enough evidence to where if your number one priority from this point forward is to make sure you don't go into basketball games allowing teams to, as easily as they are, put their centers on Josh Hart. If you're going to tell me in those matchups, it makes more sense to take Josh Hart out of the starting lineup, I hear that argument and I understand it. And there's a lot of merit to it. Now, there's trade-offs. There's trade-offs to all these things. There are no easy, good solutions to the problems the Knicks have against these teams. Because there is a drastic difference on the defensive end in terms of your backline defense, your rebounding when Josh Hart is not in the game. And the reason why I'm not standing here today saying Josh Hart needs to be removed from the starting lineup against these teams is because I know those trade-offs exist. I'm aware of them, and I am cognizant of the fact that this team might not be able to defend, rebound at the level required if Josh Hart is not playing alongside Karl-Anthony Towns. I think his rebounding, his defense is that critical. But something has to give here. And it's incumbent upon the coaching staff to figure out a way to turn Karl-Anthony Towns into an all-star center against every team in the NBA, not just against the 90% of the NBA. Because the 10% of the NBA are the teams that you're going to have to go through in the playoffs. I think we have that as the biggest takeaway from this matchup. Tatum was amazing. And credit to him. I thought, and we'll transition to a quasi-positive here, because I watched Cleveland play Boston a couple of nights ago. And I was, as a Knicks fan who has seen Jalen Brunson sort of be held back a little bit in terms of guarding on the perimeter against some of these bigger, more elite wings. It was quite a shock to the system to watch Darius Garland be asked to guard Jason Tatum on the perimeter and Kristaps Porzingis in the post time and time again. I watched that game and saw Boston still manage to get up 48 threes in the night. And I was wondering, are the Knicks going to view that matchup and try to emulate that in a way to reduce the amount of Celtics threes that are going to be taken in this game? And right from the start, Jalen Brunson was asked to guard. He was asked to navigate multiple screens on a possession. Asked to guard Jaylen Brown in the post. Jason Tatum on the perimeter. I can't think of a game where Jalen Brunson was asked to guard in that way from the opening tip to the moment he left the game. I thought Jalen Brunson's performance in a game we all want to forget was commendable in terms of his effort, what was asked of him on the defensive end, and what he was still able to produce on the offensive end. To me, looking ahead, I think the only way the only way to compete truly with Boston is to try as humanly possible to lower and keep their 3-point volume at it's not even a reasonable number, a number that most teams would think would be a great shooting night in terms of the volume. But can you shave off 5 to 8 threes from the Celtics top line number? And the best way to do that is to not have Brunson hedging and showing, recovering, and then you're in rotation, and then it's drive, kick, close out, penetrate, kick, open three. The fact that Brunson was able to hold up the way he was did limit the threes the Celtics were taking. Celtics took 9 in the first quarter, and I thought, despite the score, the Celtics scoring in the 30s and the Knicks being down, I thought it was an overall positive outcome. The Knicks are going to have to do this going forward. And it's, as I was watching Brunson in the second half, in the early fourth quarter, just get thrown around, still fighting, still clawing, but just 6'7", 240-pound, physically strong wings pushing him around, centers screening him. I did wonder, like, can you, looking ahead to a playoff series, can you reasonably expect Brunson to do this? And this gets back to the Karl Towns problem, because think about what was expected of Brunson to lead this team, to keep them in the game, doing it in a way that reminded all of us of what the team looked like when Julius Randle went down last year. And in those matchups, the Knicks would do their best, but they would make sure Brunson was not guarding the best players on the other team. So the Knicks asked Jalen Brunson to put in as much work on defense as he has maybe in his entire Knicks career, while also being the only effective offensive weapon on the team. So until you fix the Karl Towns problem, you're left with the idea that, yes, you can make Jalen guard, and it makes the most sense to do that. It's an effective strategy. But can he do that and not have his co-all-star playing with him and playing at an all-star level? To me, it's one positive, but also represents how important it is for Karl-Anthony Towns to play at a level against these great defensive teams that is commensurate with what he's being paid and what we expect of him. Injury aside, whatever he's dealing with, I understand it may have hobbled him, and to me, he was as bad on the defensive glass as at any point in this season. So I'm going to assume that whatever the injury was to the knee, played a large part in that. But he played in the game, and how many times was Karl-Anthony Towns defending in space, and instead of having his hands ready to contest the shot, they were down at his waist. And by the time the shot was basically released, I always talk about the visual to the basket. Clean visual to the basket. A late shot contest does nothing to an NBA shooter. All that is basically showing that you are giving an effort to contest the shot. But that's a wide open NBA shot, and especially against the shooters the Celtics have. That's an effort thing. That's a technique thing. That's a pride thing. You think about the amount of times the Celtics were able to beat Towns. Drop at the level, hedging. And I just kept thinking, like, there has to be a level of pride here that he's got to tap into. And then there was a play in the second half where the Knicks dropped him back a little bit. And it looked like him and I believe Bridges was the one guarding the ball, were a little indecisive in terms of like whether or not this was a switch. And I was texting with Benji earlier, and we were going, I'm like, where's the options here based on we've seen Cat at the level, we've seen Cat and drop, nothing's working. What's the solution? His response was, well, we haven't seen the switch, which was 100% true. And it seemed like on that particular play that they might have intended that to be the case. But Cat wasn't pressed up on Tatum enough, and the hands were just at his hips. And it was a late contest, and credit to Doris Burke for calling it out, or Richard Jefferson. I think both of them might have. It's an open shot of the NBA. And after all the damage the Celtics had inflicted upon Towns and the Knicks, you would have thought that pride would have kicked in a little bit. Credit to him for playing in the game. He has the ethos of what a Tom Thibodeau team is all about. Like, if you can play, you play. And again, I'm being hard on the performance, but I do want to credit the player for playing in the game. But if you're playing in the game, then you got to be held to a standard. And he failed at whatever standard, whatever reasonable standard you could have about a player of his caliber. He failed miserably. And he was not the only one. But the reason why it's so important to acknowledge the performance is that this is now a pattern. It's a burning red flag pattern that is developed over this season. And until we see evidence to disprove, it is a massive question for this team going forward. It is the question in my mind for this team going forward. Because if Karl-Anthony Towns against these great defenses is not going to be an all-star level player, this team is not getting to where they want to go. They're a good basketball team with Towns being good. But to be great, he has to be great. And we have to hold him to that standard. And he has not met that standard against these teams. And there's plenty of season left. He has not played his first playoff game as a New York Knick. He has an incredible amount of time left to write his story with this franchise. But think to yourself, after seeing him play against these teams, do you have confidence right now he can flip the switch and be great against these teams in the playoffs? So many things matter, and there's so many things that we will talk about through this night and into tomorrow, 11:25 Eastern time. But there is no more critical issue facing this team right now than Karl-Anthony Towns, and how to figure out a way to help him be great. And the primary weight of that falls on the shoulders of the player. And he's got to live up. He's got to live up to his resume, his contract, and frankly, the players who traded for him. We will get into all the things tonight, and there's plenty of things to digest. I hear you if you tell me Josh Hart should not, or Precious Achiuwa should not have started that game. Tibbs heard you because he started the second half with the Deuce McBride. And yes, Tibbs put his team in a hole by playing Precious Achiuwa in the starting lineup. But can you really tell me that after what you've seen over these two games against the Celtics, I'll remind you, 263 points for the Celtics, 213 for the Knicks. bludgeoned in 2 games. Do you really think Deuce McBride is changing the fact that, as I said when we started 20 minutes ago, 25 minutes ago, the chasm between these two teams is a mile long. And the best way to bridge that is for Karl Anthony Towns to be a star player against these teams. But we'll get into all the super chats, all the, I'm sure, glass half empty, maybe some glass half full feelings on this game. I can't tell you that I'm feeling positive right now. Clearly I'm not. And I'm just disappointed in what we've seen against some of these big time teams from our star player. And I think it's incumbent upon us to hold him accountable. But before we get to your super chats, we will take a quick break to tell you about Rocket Money. The start of the new year is the perfect time to get organized, set goals, and prioritize what matters most. For me, a top priority in my financial wellness, which feels more important than ever. Thanks to Rocket Money, my goals feel achievable. They show me all my subscriptions right in one place and help me easily cancel ones that I've forgotten I've been paying for. Last week, there was 4 or 5 that I found that I had no idea. It was on a different credit card that I just hadn't been using. And it was literally years of just every month money just coming out of my account, not using those products whatsoever. But Rocket Money definitely helped me out with that. They pull together all my spending across all my different accounts so I can clearly track my spending habits and see where I can cut back. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all of the app's premium features. So cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster. With Rocket Money, go to rocketmoney.com/gameon today. That's rocketmoney.com/gameon. rocketmoney.com/gameon. So Kev, thank you so much for being on the ones and twos, helping me out here. Let's get to the super chats. Let's get through this together, shall we? Robert W. Cross kicking us off. Thank you, Robert, for checking in. The coach's job is to put the players in a position to be successful. Tibbs is getting bossed by Missoula. Not good. Yeah, listen, if the point here, knowing Robert, I'm pretty sure this is an Achua situation. Like, you can't start him in the game. Deuce needed to be in the game. I get it. And I understand that and completely agree with you. I was understanding of what Tibbs was going for, starting Achua. He's going to lean on some of the things that Achua helps him with. Defensive rebounding, offensive rebounding, defensive versatility. But the point here is that the Celtics are just too surgical with their approach. You can't have 2 players that they're just going to pay zero attention to. The first 4 or 5 possessions on the night, the Knicks were running into walls of humanity in the paint. While I'm talking, I'll pull the finishing at the rim numbers because I know they were terrible through most of the game. And part of that is the lack of spacing. Now, there again, trade-offs are real thing. I think there's a resistance to maybe consider both sides of the equation here. Like, you're gonna go, if you go into that game with Deuce McBride, with Jalen Brunson starting, your spacing is much more modernized, for lack of a better term, but you are going to give things up on the defensive side. But listen, I'm also like trying to think big picture, and the Knicks have just given up 263 points to this team in 2 games. They're unable to generate offense at a level that good offenses can put out right now, let alone elite offenses, scoring 109 and 104 points in these two matchups. So there are critical issues facing this team. And look, here are the numbers. Knicks at the rim shot 12 of 27, 44%. I can't imagine. I would be shocked if the Knicks shot that bad in the game this year from the shooting at the rim. And that was from cleaning the glass. 12 of 27. And I can't deny that part of that, maybe a large part, was the presence of Josh Hart and Precious Achiuwa. And I get it. I honor it. And I'm not going to sit here tonight after that game and tell you you're wrong. Thank you, Robert. I really appreciate it. P. Duggar, thank you. Thank you, P. Duggar. Appreciate you checking in. Precious is absolute garbage. He couldn't play for Toronto, but we love him here. We don't even have Sims to match up with size anymore. Just stupid. Listen, I'm not going to allow Precious's absolute garbage to go, without me defending Precious Achiuwa, who I think has been a fantastic defensive player for this team this year. And there were large stretches of last year that he was critical to the Knicks winning games, despite how undermanned they were. So there's just certain games that sort of highlight areas of weakness. And unfortunately, the team the Knicks are competing with for supremacy in the Eastern Conference, along with Cleveland, is as surgical as any team in the NBA at exposing those weaknesses and making sure that you're going to feel them. And they can do it because their coach is really good at exposing them. But most importantly, they have the personnel to do it. They're a smart basketball team. Like Luke Cornett, for whatever he's missing in terms of his skill and athleticism, is as smart a basketball player as you're going to find. And his size matters. So many attempts the Knicks had against him as the closest defender at the basket ended with a block or a bad missed layup. Credit to him for his performance and the Celtics team. They are such an impressive group. Missing Porzingis, missing Drew Holiday, and still they just come at you in waves. Pritchard, just an ungodly level shooter right now. Horford, his spacing ability, his passing, quick decision making. Of course, Tatum and Brown, elite, and Derek White, who didn't even, have his, the most like Derek White game, is still an incredible basketball player. Just in terms of how they see the game and process the game, and their ability to process things in such a quick manner, and their quick decision making is what really makes them an elite offense. And they take advantage of all your weaknesses. And if the point here is you can't allow them to have the weaknesses to poke at, I get it. I don't think Precious Achiuwa is a garbage basketball player, but against this Celtics team, when he's really needed to be your 4 with no OG Anunoby, it's just not going to be his night. And we have to sort of call a spade in that regard. Thank you, P. Duggar. And I think you have one more coming up. The horrible coach didn't challenge for Deuce. So this was, I assume, the 3-point foul call on Derek White. Look, I thought it was a foul. I posted on X, I thought it was a foul. It seemed like he may have gotten him up top, but he, in my opinion, certainly had his left foot in the landing zone. Look, Tibbs is as good as any coach in the NBA at challenging calls or whomever. And I'm forgetting his name, but the assistant coach tasked with actually giving Tibbs the thumbs up, thumbs down. Like, he's been elite this year, so I trust those two to make the right decision in terms of not challenging it. But it was a big swing moment in the game and a frustrating one. And you just wish Deuce was a little more disciplined on that, with the shot clock dwindling to nothing, just to stay out of the landing zone or the shot release. Thank you, P. Doug. I really appreciate it. Matt G. What's up, Matt? Thank you so much. I hope Cat is hurt, because that's the worst pick and roll D I've ever watched. Can't hedge well, can't protect the rim. I mean, you nailed it. I mean, was it the worst I've ever seen? I mean, I watched Enes Kanter, Freedom, whatever his name is, play pick and roll defense. So I can't say it's the worst I've seen, but it's up there. I mean, this was really bad. And I'll acknowledge again, there's an injury component here on the injury report, questionable up until game time. I'm sure that limited his mobility, but this is not like we haven't seen this from Cat this year. I think whenever he's been asked to be more aggressive in pick and roll coverage, it's been an abject failure. He just hasn't been able to contain the ball. His ability to recover back to his man is limited. You're also asking your wings to pull in and potentially help out on any pocket or any short roll that's going to occur there, and you're going to be in rotation. And look, you have Josh Hart and Mikal Bridges and OG Anunoby, and the theory being, and I get the theory that you are empowering them to make plays and be the great defenders they are, and they have been. But that only works when you're not being absolutely blown by at the level of the screen. And that's what happened tonight, and it's happened just too often this year to feel confident that Cat can perform that level of pick and roll coverage, at least in a drop. And this is where I go back to, and I get there's a reasonable debate regarding where the Knicks should be, but at least in drop, you're keeping the ball in front. You run into other problems. Again, trade-offs, right? Your Cat is not active with his hands, just hasn't been. It was an issue today. And when you're in drop and you have a player that's got his defender in jail, or he's snaking the pick and roll and he's getting to that floater range, like, you have to be active with your hands to contest. And so many times Cat has his hands down as he's retreating, and he's just given up what in effect is a wide open floater from the short mid range. You juxtapose that with the guy we hope to be seeing in less than a month, Mitchell Robinson, and just watch and recall how active Mitch is with his hands to prevent those short mid-range shots to be clean looks. So, damned if you do, damned if you don't, just is a real thing right now with Cat guarding the ball in pick and roll coverage. I mean, you could tell me right now that you rather him just switch this stuff and guard whomever it is one-on-one. And I'm like, go ahead and try that, because what's they're trying now is just not working. At least not consistently, and certainly not against an offensive player like Jason Tatum. Matt, you're on it in terms of the diagnosis there. How to remedy it? Well, that's a bigger question, and a big one facing this team right now. Thank you, Matt. Dom Cappuccini, thank you so much, Dom. Really appreciate it. It's been a pretty good month. Memphis and Denver was great. Boston isn't them, and frankly, we still can't see them without KP and Drew. You're right there. I suppose overall better night than opening night. I mean, I guess it was. I think it's better than opening night because we have some evidence that this team can go up against Denver and Memphis and perform at a extremely high level. And I do like, as I touched on in the monologue at the top, that Jalen Brunson guarding in space was a smart strategy that could pay dividends in the next matchup. And the month has been pretty good. And this team has been playing good basketball. But it's just such a stark difference when this team has to play against teams that can put a wing on Cat, switch everything, and remove the Cat Brunson pick and roll from the playbook. And that idea, I don't think it's gotten the play that it deserves, because that 2-man action, I don't know what the numbers are as I'm speaking to you today, but there was a point where you could argue that was the best 2-man game in the NBA. At least in November, it was the best 2-man action in the NBA. Period. It was the best. And the volume of that action has gone down month over month. The efficiency has dropped a little bit as well. And when you don't have it now to be the bellwether of your offense against the Celtics, the Oklahoma City Thunders, the Cavaliers, the Houston Rockets, like, they're teams where that is just not going to be an option for you to generate great offense. It just makes everything tougher, and it puts so much more pressure on Jalen Brunson. And the solution, the fixes, and this is the most worrying part, is I don't think there's a great one. I can rattle off several ideas and several things that could make this offense better against these teams, but it's just improving it potentially on the margins. And it's, as I said, it's a pattern now. It's a pattern that will need to stop if this team is, playing in the Eastern Conference Finals and playing in the NBA Finals potentially. Thank you, Dom. I appreciate it. Freeway Hustler 21. Thank you so much for checking in. Cat needs to stop crying about fouls and worry about not getting outplayed by Luke Cornett. Ouch. That was disgusting to watch. Cat's complaining remains one of the funniest things on a nightly basis, and I hope he never stops doing it. Even if it's potentially taking him mentally out of a basketball game, I think the comedy aspect to it is amazing, especially in a night like tonight when there just isn't anything to enjoy or laugh at. Cat yelling foul as loud enough for anyone in the arena to hear, and then not get teed up for it somehow every night is just, I can't not laugh about it. It's amazing. He thinks he gets fouled on every call. I don't think he gets a great call in general. But I hope he never stops doing it, because it's pretty amazing. But he getting outplayed by Luke Cornett is not what you want from your, $50+ million center. But it happened, and it was hard to watch. Hopefully he gets his knee healthy, if that was hindering him as much as it potentially was. I don't know. Trying to think, potentially some glass half full right now. But yeah, Luke Cornett, I fantastic in his role, but his impact on the game was tiers above Cats in terms of their performances. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you checking in. Robert Cross again. Robert says, I don't want to see Hart, Precious, Cat on the floor together ever again. Well, look, that lineup, to be fair, And look, tonight is going to mess these numbers up, but the lineup data with those three has been good this year. And I think as I'm processing this with you all, where I'm landing on this is that this lineup, that trio, can be very effective against a lot of NBA teams, probably the majority of NBA teams. But maybe it's what I'm asking of the head coach is like, can you be flexible enough to where you have a lineup against the Celtics, you have a lineup against the Spurs, you have a lineup against the Hornets, you have a lineup against the Cavaliers. Like, can you diversify the 5-man lineup that you put out there every night against the team that is you're going to be playing that night? And look, I understand that is a almost non-starter for this coach who likes players staying in their roles. This is who he is. He likes to know what his starting lineup is going to be, the group that the rotations. He likes the pairings, the trios, how they're going to play together, the minutes. He likes to know that it's his comfort zone. And where Tibbs gets to sort of strict in his ways is when he doesn't want to expand out of that comfort zone. Yeah, he has in certain ways over his Knicks tenure, but there are certain things he just has not. So I am fully aware that this preaching this fluid starting lineup against the individual team, the certain team you're playing is, it's not going to happen. I understand it, but there's merit to the idea that you would have against the Celtics team every intention to prevent them from having those weak points for them to poke at and never stop. But if this trio against maybe even the Pacers is a high quality offensive team that moves the ball, like maybe that group can work and do enough damage on the offensive glass and manage to sort of pull together a very good offense and limit them on defense. Like there's, the Orlando Magic, that team, that trio would give that ball club hell on the defensive end. So but can you adjust from game to game? Look, I know he won't. I know most coaches won't, but I can't help but think about it. Robert, thank you so much. Appreciate that. Dom Cappuccini again. Thank you so much, Dom. I really appreciate the super chat contribution here. Knicks need to get their weight up. Minus OG can't be the initial excuse. I wonder if we might as well celebrate a first-round win as our finals. As intimidating as the Celtics look now, we haven't seen nothing until May. I mean, I can't argue with anything you just said there. And, there's you saying the Knicks need to get their weight up. Like, I'm taking that and I'm going to use it in a literal sense where there's times against certain teams where the Knicks just on the defensive end can look a little small, a little, lack a little bit in terms of the strength area, especially with OG Anunoby not being there again, in a game like tonight. As good as Mikal Bridges can be guarding the basketball, there's just a limit to the physicality he can put forth on a game-to-game basis. I think physically sometimes, the Knicks can get a little overwhelmed, and I think that's why Tibbs is leaning on Precious playing the 4 minutes. Now, if you bump everyone up a spot and have Deuce in there, I love Deuce, but also acknowledge the limitations there. Where limits on the size on defense, the fact that on offense his spacing is clearly fantastic and has been that way now for 2 years. His shooting in general, while it's fallen off this year from 3. It's still very good. But I mean, call a spade a spade. If he's not catching the ball and getting up a 3, the options there to be an effective offensive player for him is like keep the ball, moving. He makes quick decisions, but if he's driving a closeout, and if you project into the playoffs, Dom's talking about May. Well, if you're in May, you're in the playoffs, and we saw this with DiVincenzo last year. Teams are going to run him off the line, and then what are you able to do inside the arc? The frustrating part is for Deuce specifically in the playoffs, like his finishing was actually impressive, especially his left-hand finishing in the half court, especially in the Indiana series. But his finishing this year, I don't know what is going on, but it's been a disaster. He can't get anything to go now, and his decisions at the rim leave a lot to be desired, primarily because he's a 1-foot finisher. So he is going in off 1 foot. There's no 2-foot stop, survey, get into the chest. If you don't have it, pivot away, get that pass out. Think how Jalen Brunson can get into the paint off on 2 feet, still maintain his pivot foot. Defense collapses. He can still kick that ball out. You can still run another action. If Deuce is getting into the paint, he's going off 1 foot, and it's a layup, a make, or it's a miss. And a lot of those times, it's a contested layup, which is for Deuce McBride now a inefficient shot. And because he doesn't have a reliable floater to get to in the short mid-range, there's a limit to his ability finishing in the paint. Kev, how's the sound now in terms of the audio quality?
It's there. I'll just say check the cables. Just make sure they're tight.
Tightening up the cable. Yep. No, you got to tighten those things up, man. You get a little loose like the Knicks got. You got to make sure you tighten things up. Got the hardwired connection here. I know Kev is ready to go if things were to go haywire to hop on. But trying to prevent that right now. So hopefully we keep the video and the audio going strong here. But Dom, thank you so much. Okay, cool. Thank you, Dom, for checking in. Really appreciate it. Hush Z, thank you so much for checking in, man. Appreciate it. Won't lie, this game deflated my confidence in this team. They do so well exposing our weaknesses. It's absurd. Can we chalk it up to a bad game? Not sure. The answer is no. You cannot chalk this up to just a bad game. It would be malpractice for the coaching staff to chalk this up as just a bad game and sort of like remove it from your memory and move on. Like this is an alarming performance, and it's an alarming performance because we have opening night and we have other games against teams with similar abilities to expose the weaknesses you're referring to. Celtics are the best in the NBA doing it, but there are other teams that can also do those things. And until the Knicks can figure it out in a way where they can generate offense at a high level and then defend on the other end, like it's just the ceiling is lower than I think all of us want to admit. And that's just a harsh reality of where they are right now. Trade deadline came and went. There was no one available that they could have reasonably attained with the pieces and the assets left in the cupboard to make a big difference. The buyout market, maybe there's someone that can help on the margins here. DeLon Wright, not the answer. So Mitchell Robinson on the way back, but again, Mitchell Robinson against the Celtics team, against any stretch big team. And another alarming piece is that we didn't see Porzingis in this game, and the Knicks have never they have not guarded Porzingis at a high level since he became a Celtic. And Mitchell Robinson struggles against bigs like Kristaps Porzingis. So I don't think Mitch is necessarily the answer, and I don't think he's the answer on offense either against this team. So where do you go? That's the $1 million question right now. It's like, where do you go as a team with the knowing that this is basically the roster? This roster, I get OG Anunoby is not healthy, but I think OG obviously helps things. He makes it a little tougher to just ignore on the perimeter. But I don't think he changes the overall calculus for the Celtics. Speaking of OG, we have a nice super chat coming in. Thank you, Kev, from Deadword 604. If you think OG would have been a big difference tonight, I have some oceanfront property in Iowa to sell you. Yeah, I mean, you just reiterated exactly what I said. I don't think he is making I don't think he would have made a big difference tonight, unfortunately. Listen, they need him healthy because there were points in this game where his physicality, his size at 6'8", 240 pounds would have been incredibly important. But in terms of like how the Celtics are going to operate, they're operating the exact same way with OG Anunoby playing or not playing. And he would not have been the primary defender on Jason Tatum. Maybe he would have shifted onto him as Tatum got going here, but that would have been Mikal's matchup. OG makes those rolls to the rim maybe a little bit tougher, getting in and digging down on some of those drives, but they're so spaced out where I don't even know if OG Anunoby can affect a drive with the amount of spacing that the Celtics can provide. So he's not the answer in terms of getting the Knicks to the level of the Celtics. He helps. I'm not going to lie to you. Of course he helps, but again, we're bridging a giant gap, and they're going to need the players that played tonight to be so much better to bridge that gap. OG Anunoby helps that. Mitchell Robinson potentially can help that, but it's going to take all those factors to really change where the team is right now. All right, before we get back into those super chats, we're going to take a quick break to tell you about BetUS. Did you know BetUS is also a casino? For all my followers who like slots or live casino dealers, take advantage of BetUS's amazing sign-up bonus, 200%. A 200% sign-up bonus up to $5,000 or 250% for crypto sign-up bonus up to $5,000. Get ready for a rush with the BetUS casino. Generous promotions and tournaments make every play even more rewarding. Sign up now and experience the difference. And as always, use promo code YouTube150 to receive a 150% bonus on your first deposit, as well as a 125% bonus on your next two deposits up to $2,000. Remember, gambling involves risk. Please only gamble with funds that you can afford to lose. All forms of betting carry financial risk, and it is down to the individual to make bets with or without the assistance of information provided. Thank you, BetUS, for the support, and we will continue along with our next super chat. Mr. Fabro checking in. What is the best fruit, and why is it pineapples? Not sure if there's a reference I'm missing here, because I'm about to talk about fruit in a legitimate way and assume this is a real question about fruit. But if I'm missing a alternate meaning to what's happening here, I apologize in advance. Pineapples are not the best fruit. They make my tongue hurt, and they have little needles all over them. So if you look at a pineapple under a microscope, they're little daggers where when you eat them, they are stabbing your tongue. And I get it. For some people, they get more of a reaction than others, but to me, it's not fun. They're not the best fruit. I think pound for pound, the best fruit when it's like at its best is the mango in terms of like peak flavor. I think the most like stable, versatile fruit is the banana. Like you always know it's solid. It's everywhere you know what you're getting, and it's versatile. Um, the strawberry, very good too. I think I might put the strawberry like when it's like peak flavor as number one because of its, how good it is in that small window of time. But I can't go with you on the pineapple. I think it's got certain weaknesses as a fruit in terms of like what it can do to the human tongue that just it takes it out of the contention for like tier like 1 or 2 fruit. Maybe it's like maybe mid tier because you can like grilling it actually does take away some of that like punch that it can give you. So it can mellow it out a little bit. Like a grilled pineapple is actually pretty underrated. So maybe it's a little more versatile than I'm giving it credit for, but I can't say it's the best fruit. I know. Kev, are you with me on the pineapple not being the best fruit in the fruit game, man? Where are you on that?
I think mangoes are up there.
Yeah.
But strawberries are trash to me. I've never had a good strawberry. I've never had a good strawberry in my life.
Well, you can't have them like February. Like June, July, like get a good local strawberry, like pretty. I think it's like pretty elite myself.
Who knows? Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, I can't go with you on the pineapple, but thank you for the super chat anyway. And thank you for changing the topic for a bit. Hush Z, you see why Minnie traded for Gobert. Yeah, it's a fair and reasonable take. I'm happy that Karl Towns is the starting center for the New York Knicks. I think the value, the effort, the value, the performance overall that he's provided this year has clearly been everything you could have possibly imagined for the Knicks. We see limitations here against these great teams, and if the calculus by the T-Wolves were like, we can't win with him at the highest level being our center. Well, if we're going to be honest with ourselves, we have seen some evidence to give credence to that theory and that perspective. There's I do wonder like what the potential return of Mitchell Robinson means for all this. Because if we're seeing the defense guarding ball screens and we're seeing how like rough it is, like I'm sure this is like a real thing the coaching staff is trying to mitigate and improve. But now he was in the center last year against the Dallas Mavericks, and they still brought him into a lot of those actions, and he struggled mightily in that series against the Mavs. So playing him at the power forward doesn't remove him from guarding at a better level in the pick and roll, but it might limit it a little bit. And maybe you gain enough in terms of the rebounding to offset things on offense that you're going to likely lose in terms of your spacing and your ability to generate drives to the rim. The cat drive has been an effective source of offense. Don't have the numbers, but I'm picturing his drives over the past several games, and it feels like the volume of those have gone down a little bit, or they've become a little more, just a little tougher. Maybe that's some of the OG Anunoby impact, and that's kind of what I'm seeing here, just a lack of spacing. But yeah, I think you're right. This is in large part why they made the move, because they didn't believe Cat as a center defending at a level good enough to be a title contender. And we've seen some of those issues pop up against, a small but alarming subset of teams in the NBA. Thank you, Hushzi. Appreciate it. Don Cappuccini again. Thank you, Don. Really appreciate it, man. Thank you. Before the season, I said 55 wins, second seed, and a second round floor. I didn't expect Boston would be a 2 seed. So I think I could deal with a second round exit better now that we know what we know. Yeah, 55 wins is still attainable. I think the second seed, I don't know the actual where the Knicks are in terms of like behind Boston. It's going to look and feel like they're within striking distance. And they are in terms of, the wins losses, but I think Boston is not only a different tier when they play each other, but it just feels like Boston's about to go on like a big heater and reel off a bunch of wins here. So I don't if I had to bet, like I don't think the Knicks are getting to the second spot this year. And second round floor is a fair, reasonable expectation of where this team is. We've all talked about maybe this team needing another off season to have its fullest form and its most championship ready form, which may be true, but I do think that's a bit of a bitter pill to swallow here because we've seen flashes now against really good teams of elite play, but we just haven't seen it carry over against these teams that can do these rangier, athletic, high quality defensive teams with wings to guard Cat. Like we've seen time and time again, the Knicks struggle. So it does sort of damper, I think, the performances against Memphis and Denver and some of these other like impressive wins, the Indiana win earlier in the year at the Garden. There's been really good wins, but it hasn't carried over against these other teams. And that's the big issue facing the group right now. Thank you, Dom. I appreciate it. Blue Monk 611. Thank you so much for checking in, contributing. Appreciate all of you guys. Listen via radio, so I didn't see the game. Maybe I'm relying on numbers too much. Am I wrong to be irked by the low number of shots Cat took? Well, that's strictly as a product of the theme of the show, which is where are the shots coming from? The drives are going to be condensed and muddied up by the lack of spacing, which Tibbs could have and did adjust in the second half, but could have not presented Cat with to start the game. So you have the driving game being a little limited. You have the pick and roll option here as a pop or a roll man taken completely off the table. So there's 4 or 5 high quality looks that are just not happening now. And then because Boston is not in rotation, Cat, even as a spacer, is just not going to, the Knicks aren't generating a ton of catch and shoot opportunities. Jalen Brunson, for all his brilliance, is not a guy that's going to create the amount of 3-point looks to really sort of utilize and take advantage of Cat's elite catch and shoot ability. The best way and the way we all thought was going to sort of manifest was Cat popping Jalen pick and rolls. And it just hasn't been there that much. I think the last I checked, Brunson had assisted Cat on 15 or so threes the entire year. And I'm going to get the number here just to be completely sure, but it is a number that you would think would be much higher. But, picture in your mind Jalen Brunson assisting Karl-Anthony Towns for a three. It's 20. So 23s this year, Brunson assisting the Cat. Like 20 in the amount of games they played together is just not a lot. I mean, Brunson has assisted Josh Hart on 21. So if that doesn't like sort of highlight and ring true the issue that this team has right now in terms of generating great offense. The Jalen Brunson Cat pick and roll, Cat popping was going to be a huge source of offense. And it seemed like it was going to be that way earlier in the year. But to assist Cat on only 23s shows that advantage has been nullified. And then when Cat has been spacing against these great teams, it's not like Jalen is finding him for wide open threes, because Jalen doesn't have that level of gravity as a driver. He just doesn't, and he's is small in stature, so passing windows can be tough for him, especially when things are condensed, playing in small windows. So it's all these reasons, Blue Monk 611, why the Knicks have trouble sometimes just generating a lot of high quality looks from Karl Anthony Towns. Highly efficient player that has some limitations that can sort of suppress his volume in certain matchups. And we saw that tonight. All right, moving on to our next super chat. Sam Garcia, reality check for the team. And thank you, Sam, for the super chat. Reality check for the team and the fan base tonight. Still got a ways to go in terms of roster construction with very few assets to use going forward. Still got ways to go in terms of roster construction. Yeah, I think that is the point of maybe the fully formed roster is going to be the team starting next season. But I'm so locked into what this team is right now that it's hard for me to project that going forward. But your point about it being a reality check is dead on. And as I've said now a couple of times, like if you thought the Knicks were on the Celtics level, like you had the big reality check, because they're just not. And not only are they not on their level, I don't even have, even if I was being the most optimistic, I can't even drum up a scenario where they get to the Celtics level. And look, the Celtics may lose before they play the Knicks in the playoffs. Like Knicks can get to the Eastern Conference Finals and not potentially see the Celtics. Who knows? I mean, crazier things can happen. Likely the most likely scenarios, the Knicks are going to be on the Celtics side of the bracket. So it would take like an extraordinary circumstance, but crazier things have happened, and maybe the Knicks can play them in the playoffs and the Celtics go through a really tough shooting series. But it at this juncture right here, right now on February the 9th, now as we move into past midnight here on the East Coast, like right now they're not there. And it would take the Celtics having a sort of performance that is just so far below their normal level for the Knicks to win that it would be almost unreasonable. It would be unreasonable to expect that to occur. Even if it might occur, but you can't reasonably expect it to happen. That's how big a gap this is between these two teams right now. Thank you, Sam. Really appreciate you checking in. Thank you so much. Rafa. Thank you, Rafa. Appreciate it. Frauds, all caps. Not our year, not this team. Disgusting. Yeah, look, I knew the vitriol would be there. And I honor it, and I appreciate it. I think this is a bit strong in terms of the word choice, if I'm going to be fair. But if your point here is that this team is just not built to compete with a team like Boston, you have every bit of reason to be right now. I've quoted the two games. I mean, they've gotten bludgeoned in two games by this team. A team the Knicks built in large part to compete with. Mikal Bridges and Karl Anthony Towns were brought in large part to specifically compete with the Celtics. So in two games, that has been a complete failure. And that doesn't mean those moves were failures. It doesn't mean those moves were wrong. Like those moves have been in so many ways hugely positive for this team. But if the goal was to compete with Boston and those two players were brought in to do that, then I mean, there's no other thing to say than it's just hasn't panned out, excuse me, the way the front office envisioned. And that's something they're gonna have to reckon with. And as a couple have said, and I've stated, maybe it is another next year's team to really figure it out. But right now they're not there. And for a large part, it was pretty disgusting to watch. Thank you, Rafa. Dom Cappuccini again. Thank you, Dom. Really appreciate you hanging out and contributing here. If Dadier can develop into a reliable rotation player, that could go a long way into evening the battlefield with Boston. That and whatever moves they are able to make along the margins. Certainly Dadier, if he is able to figure out a way to be a rotation player by next season, that would be a huge win for the Knicks. 6'7", 6'8" wing, highly skilled, very good awareness on offense, but will be 20 next year. So to expect him to be in the rotation is probably a bit far-fetched, but I think his development and how he performed, at least in summer league and some of the Westchester games I've seen, like there does seem to be like a really high level way he thinks and processes the game. Like he's a quick decision maker, and his cutting, his off ball movement, his ability to pass, I think are beyond even the pre-draft projections for him. So he does have a really good floor to work with. I worry specifically about him to do 2 minutes of a Dadier scouting report. I worry about the athleticism at the NBA level. That's sort of number one for me. Despite like real wing size, I worry about the athleticism, and I love the way the shot looks, but it just hasn't gone in at like a high level this year with the Westchester team, and then even last year playing overseas. So I think he is a theoretical shooter that looks the part, but we just haven't seen it in game action of late. So that's going to be a question mark. But yeah, him developing would be massive, and then whatever they can do along the margins next offseason and potentially in the buyout market this season would be huge. But they also just more importantly need their guys that they have on the roster to play better. And Mikal Bridges had a couple nice moments on offense, but really was not impactful on that end. And then of course on defense just was not a deterrent in any way, shape, or form against Jason Tatum. And I know when Tatum is going at this rate, he has everything. And he had the in-between game, he had the drive game, he had his pull-up three, like his isolation, side steps, step backs, like the full repertoire was on display. And when he's playing at that level, like it's almost like a tip your cap sort of outing. But we've seen some games here from Mikal this year that where the resistance just isn't there, and he didn't perform well, and he needs to be more consistently a two-way elite player. We need more of that, and the improvement, the development has to primarily come within, because right now there's just not enough for this season for this team to bring in players other than, of course, Mitchell Robinson, who maybe he is the one that changes the team's course a bit against these big time teams. But thank you, Dom. Jason M. Thank you, Jason. Oof, this is gonna be a tough one. Cat is effing soft. Abused today on both sides of the ball. Celtics' strategy was to attack Brunson and Cat. Brunson held his own. Cat was atrocious. You nailed it, Jason. That was the strategy. How many times was Brunson brought into the action? And how many times, to his credit, did he just keep the ball in front, force misses, keep the Knicks out of rotation? And when the screen was set and Cat was either at the level or in drop, how many times was the dam broken? And how many times did that resort in a paint touch into an open three? So I am 100% with you. Like I'm not going to call Cat soft because I don't agree with that determination, and I don't define players in that way. But he didn't have it today. And when you have Jalen Brunson, you have Karl-Anthony Towns, like those are your weak points, and it presents like the big issue of like how can you have a championship defense with 2 of your 5 players defending being Jalen Brunson and Karl-Anthony Towns. Like that's the big issue here, right? Jalen got beat but several times, but I thought he was really good on defense. For what we can expect of him, what the Knicks asked of him, he held his own. Cat didn't. And you need both of them to hold their own. In a playoff series against Boston, both of them are going to have to be at least solid. Not asking for great, because you don't necessarily need to be great you don't need great from those two. You need solid. And you got one solid and one bad. And that was killed him. Just killed him. Thank you, Jason. Robert Cross again, not hating DJ, but if the talent gap is enormous, we got a problem. I've said it all year. The starting 5 is structurally flawed. You've been on that all year, and to your credit, you haven't moved off that point once. And the starting 5, even despite a lot of wins in the win column, has not been a great starting 5 in terms of the net rating and the point differential over a huge sample size. So I understand where you're getting at. Is the talent gap enormous? Like it's huge to me right now. And it's not just like if you match them up player to player, like maybe it wouldn't feel enormous, but when you factor in the synergy the Celtics have and playing together for a second season, and the fact that there was, again, no Porzingis, and that has been for years now the sort of player that has given the Knicks immense fits. They can't guard stretch 5s and haven't guarded them in the Tibbs era. So he didn't play today. And they still were not able to handle them in offense. So whether or not the talent gap is enormous, like when they play together, when you see the teams play, it feels enormous. Despite the Knicks having a lot of awesome players, the gap feels enormous. And I get there are ways to potentially bridge that gap, and one of them might be, to your point, Robert, like you just got to get as much shooting and spacing in the lineup. But we have to also acknowledge the trade-off potential of that. And that's real, but also we have enough evidence to maybe say against the Celtics team, like you got to go another direction, because you've gotten run out of the gym twice. Make a change. Even if you're not making the change against every team, make the change against the Celtics. And maybe we'll have to wait to the playoffs to happen for that change to come to fruition, potentially. But a change has to happen. Thank you, Robert. Dom again. Thank you, Dom. Really, really, really appreciate it. Just find a way to split these last 2. I don't care which one they win. Just find a way to split, and I'll be very pleased with 2/3 mark of the season. Yeah, so I'm got to get the Kev, I don't know, do you have the schedule for the next 2? I can get it here in a second. Hold on. I have it pulled up here. Knicks got at Indiana, and Atlanta. So Pacers on Tuesday. I don't need to tell you how tough the Pacers are on this Knicks team, especially at Indiana. It's been a house of horrors in some ways. Rabid crowd. The team plays faster. They're just a really good basketball team, and completely different team than the team the Knicks beat by 25 or whatever in the second game of the season. Hugely important game against the Pacers and then Atlanta. So yeah, if you can split the next two, we can feel good about this team going into the All-Star break. Indiana game is going to be fascinating because it's another data point about how they can defend a team with a Miles Turner. And can you stay out of rotation? Because Turner's gravity really does sort of put the Knicks into these rotational possessions where they're generating just 3 after 3, and the Knicks have to limit that. How are you handling the Halliburton pick and roll? Is Brunson now going to be asked? Is this now the strategy to have him just switch these actions and try to keep the Knicks out of rotation? And you're comfortable with maybe Brunson battling with Miles Turner in a post-up situation? Be very interesting to see. Thank you, Dom. And I think you have one more here. Really appreciate you hanging out with us. And in closing, if this team can find its way to top 10 defense, maybe then I can start taking them seriously as a true contender. Cat figuring out double teams would be fantastic as well. Yeah, the Cat double teams thing is kind of a problem, right? Because as good a passer as he is facing and with cutters around him, and his ability to manipulate the ball with just one hand, and his DHO ability and driving off that when he can fake the DHO. Like he's so versatile as a passer, and it does open up so many things, but his passing out of double teams just hasn't been great. And they're bringing a lot of these doubles from the bottom, meaning they're, instead of bringing the double from, traditionally the double comes from the person entering the ball. You double down, and that's an easy sort of kick out pass to make, and maybe you get a rotation. You're just one more pass and get an open three. But if the doubles come from the bottom, you're sort of forcing the post player to the baseline. And when I've seen him flourish as a post player, it's been middle paint areas, righty jump hook. If he's on the right block, left hand dribble, get into the lane, right hand push shot. Like, those are the things that he's been good at. So as a scorer, he struggles more often when he's turned to the baseline, which is the intent of sending that double there, because you're 3/4 fronting the post. So you're basically, you're not on a full front, but you're fronting enough to where he has to catch it with, if he's on the right block, with his left hand turning towards the baseline. And then the double comes, and you don't have that clean outlet pass. Jokic can chew those doubles up because he can literally pass over his head, doesn't even have to see the defender. He can throw lobs to Aaron Gordon, who they will double off many times. So he can certainly manage that. So the best way to do that is to try to face and then rip, go, maybe see the pass that way. Cat needs to figure out ways to handle those doubles from that area. It's how the Lakers doubled him in the most recent game, and he didn't handle it well. Again, the caveat being an important one is that the spacing was really constrained by the Achua Hart minutes too. So with Anunoby, it does free things up a little bit, but that specific double team from that area of the floor, he hasn't been great at beating. So he has to be better at that, and he has to just be better in the post in general against some of these matchups. He's been fine. Like, his overall post scoring numbers are okay. Like, they're above league average. Like, he's scoring in an effective way. But if you overall performance out of a Cat post up, including passes, I just don't think they've been good enough. Thank you, Dom. Really appreciate it. Thank you for checking in. All right. I am AK Legend. Thank you so much for the super chat. I wanted consistent effort tonight. Not sure how we get that from them. Maybe Tibbs switches the lineups a bit, but this should have been competitive. I thought it would be competitive without Porzingis. He was a late scratch with an illness, with no Drew Holiday, even with that, with Anunoby out, with Mitchell Robinson out. Thought the Knicks were going to have a competitive performance at MSG. You had the opening night loss, I'm sure, still fresh in their minds. But I think there's just real problems the Celtics team presents to the Knicks that even with like elite effort, being super competitive, and I don't think this was an effort issue. I think this was a talent, strategic, team synergy issue. One team just plays off each other in a incredible way. One team had the better strategy, had the more effective game plan, principles, and they also had the most talent. And then when you have all those things, you line them all up, you get scores like we saw tonight. Really tough one. All right, time for the Out of Town Scoreboard, presented by T Squared Social. Get a free draft beer when you tell them KFS sent you. Visit tsquaredsocial.com to learn about club memberships, trivia nights, sports leagues, and much more. I know the guys were at T Squared tonight in the middle of a snowstorm in New York City. So hopefully everyone got home safely. I'm sure fun was had. I'm sure frivolity occurred despite the loss. I imagine I've been in bars and get-togethers, nothing as amazing as T Squared Social, which is the best in the business, but I've been to other places where you go to watch a game and it gets out of hand early, and it's almost like a fun environment when the game is so out of hand, even when you're losing, especially when you're losing, because more drinks start flowing and you start having a good time enjoying it. But the curse lives, I guess I'll put it that way, in terms of Knicks performances when we've had these T Squared outings. But let's get to the out of town scoreboard. Only 2 games in progress as we speak. 8 seconds left in the game. The Kings are up 123-118 on the Pelicans. Zion has gone for 40 points. So it looks like the Kings are going to go to 26-26 on the year. 6:19 remaining in the fourth. Clippers leading the Jazz 105-101. Zubac with another solid outing at 22 points, 12 rebounds, 5 assists. Earlier games that are final: Mavericks beat the Rockets 116-105. Anthony Davis had his season debut, had a monster first quarter, was doing everything, hitting threes, blocking shots, dunking, playmaking, just was the entire package. Mavericks got off to a huge lead. Rockets never really were able to close the gap. Unfortunately, we got the whole Anthony Davis package here, experience, because he left the game with a non-contact injury. Doesn't sound too serious. Davis was quoted after the game to say it was nothing serious, just looked like a minor re-aggravation of his previous abdominal issue. So I'm sure the Mavericks fans, who were in great spirits, at least in the arena, from the start of the game and obviously through the game when the Mavericks playing pretty well, I'm sure they all sort of collectively held their breath about that one. But hopefully Anthony Davis is not out for too much longer. And his former team, the Lakers, had a 124-117 win over the Indiana Pacers. Austin Reeves goes for 45, 7 and 7. He has just had a fantastic season. It will be very interesting to see how he's able to meld with Luka Doncic. I'm very curious about those two playing together. I think LeBron and Luka will figure it out. I'm just curious how Austin Reeves fits into the picture here. Hawks got a nice win over the Wizards, 125-111. Trae Young, 35 and 14. The Magic got a win and scored 112 points, which is a lot of points for them. They beat the Spurs 112-111. Franz Wagner goes for 33, 12 and 5. Victor 18, 9 and 4. And the Timberwolves, they win again. I think they've had an underrated nice run here. They beat the Trailblazers 114-98. Jaden McDaniels 30, 10 and 4. He's actually been playing pretty well of late. I think rounding into form on the offensive end a little better. Nice matchup. Thunder Grizzlies. Thunder come out with a victory 125-112. I'm really fascinated to give this one a watch tomorrow. Shea Gilgeous-Alexander goes for 32 and 8. Another big night for him. Warriors get a big win against the Bulls 132-111. Steph Curry goes for 34 points. Kobe White goes for 27. Nuggets beat the Suns 122-105. Suns now 26 and 26. Jokic 26, 11 and 9 for the Nuggets. And then finally, we get a final. Kings, they get the win 123-118. That game was just about to end, and it has officially ended. So the Kings go to 26 and 26. I think, Kevin, we're out of super chats. We have wrapped up everyone, or we have more. We have more. Let's do it. Thank you, sir. Robert Cross, I would not be surprised if we see Mitch at the 5, Cat at the 4, and Hart as 6th man by end of the year. Yeah, yes. Now I think that is a reasonable take. I'll just say that. Now Mitch is going to have to come back and actually perform, and I think it would be prudent for the Knicks to see Mitch play a relatively extended period of time here before you consider this move and figure out a way with Mitch coming off the bench to have those two play together to see how it works and to see Mitch go through a period of time of health, because I don't think you want to make that move if you don't feel confident that Mitch can hold up long term, because going back to, resorting back to Cat at the 5, I don't know if that's what you want to do here, but I think Mitch at the 5 and Cat at the 4 is something they're going to tap into in probably small spurts. I think the Achua Towns minutes have been good enough to where gives me confidence that Towns and Mitch can work. But we'll have to see. Now, I've said this a few times. Gobert was really good screening for Cat and generating threes for him. So I think that is something maybe Mitch can provide. Off-ball screening out of their horn set. Cat's 3-point rate higher with Gobert than when he played without Gobert last year. So that's something just to monitor, because Cat's 3-point rate this year, you need to boost that up a little bit. And Mitch as your screener, and this is not something he has done yet as a Knicks player. Didn't really do it for Julius. Hasn't played with obviously another stretch 4 or 5. So it will take time for him to develop that awareness and that skill set. But hopefully, if he's coming back in March, he can have a month or two before things get really, really important heading to the playoffs, to be able to have that skill set. Thank you, Robert. Really appreciate it. Jason M, we killed Randall, and thank you, Jason, for another super chat. We killed Randall for his decision-making when double in the post. Cat is worse in those situations. This should be the main focus in Knicks practice. Yeah, I'm in a complete agreement with you. The Knicks have one way to adjust is to have the person that that's whoever man has gone to double. Like if that's your man, like you flash to the middle of the floor, and if Cat can hit you there, you have an opening. Now the problem right now is that it's Achua who they're doubling off, and if he's flashing to the middle, teams are just going to stay home. And if it's a Precious Achua floater, you've won the possession if you're even if he makes it, because that's not a sustainable source of offense over an extended period of time. So, but that is one way you can do that. And Cat just has to see that double coming. If you could see it sort of develop before you're engulfed by the double team, then you can make that pass. If you could quickly face up and hit and if you're cutting from the baseline, if your man has gone a double, you're cutting from the baseline, that pass can be open. But the decision making has to be like that. So you can't, it's not just holding and waiting and sort of surveying, which he'll do in the Knicks delay stuff that they run at the top of the key. And there's advantage to that because you're seeing everything. You can diagnose it. You have time for cutters to generate open space. When you're double in the post, like, quick decision making is paramount. And repetition could be the remedy here. Just seeing it more. Yes, practice, seeing it in practice, especially with but the trade deadline. I'm sorry, the All-Star break coming. You have some days off here. Maybe you can work that in as a team priority. But yeah, decision making out of the post and just being effective out of it, like make teams pay, has to be a big source of offense for the Knicks because teams are going to consistently put Cat in that position. Thank you, Jason. Iceman Sham. Thank you, Iceman Sham. Again, thank you so much. Hart looked out of sorts in the first half, and Towns has to own his space against these teams. Can't be reduced to almost a non-factor or lesser version. Yeah, Hart's first half was really bad. Really bad. And he has some turnovers in there. Obviously not a willing shooter, didn't make the shots he took. His impact, his presence on the court made it tougher on Brunson, tougher on Cat. All those things are true. I thought he was better in the second half, and I thought he was better in the second half because they were actually putting him in the action as the screener. He had even a screen and roll where he got fouled. And that's always been the counter, right, to these areas where the teams are playing off him. His spacing is sort of mucking things up. If you can bring him into the action, that makes it makes it a little tougher for the defense. It's why the adjustment the Knicks made in the first half when Achua was they were not guarding him, they immediately called a timeout, and then it was Achua screening on multiple possessions in a row. You have to bring them into the action. I think the Knicks can probably lean into Hart handling the ball more. He's run more pick and rolls this year than it seems like in years past. And you can't go to it off that often because there's just a limit to how much offense you can generate. But I think it could be something they tap into a little more. But bringing him into the action, having him screen is important to mitigate some of the way the teams are guarding him. And I agree with you. Towns just has to be better against these teams. Owning space is I like that phrasing because that was potentially an issue with the knee, maybe, but he just was not owning his space on either end of the floor. And especially in an area that he's been quite dominant in, this defensive rebounding was just not great tonight. And he was not asserting himself anywhere close to the level that was required against this team. He was taken out of the game in a multitude of ways, and he's got to figure out a way to be great against the Celtics, because if he's not great, then there's only so much Jalen Brunson can do. Mikal Bridges is too limited as a creator. We know the Josh Hart limitations. OG Anunoby can have great games every so often, but against the Celtics team, it's because they're not going to be in rotation. He's not going to get those 3-point looks, those clean corner threes. And then, do any of us think OG Anunoby creating with the ball is going to be great against the Celtics team? So it's going to have to fall back on Brunson and Cat being all-stars. And I think Brunson can get there against the Celtics, but Karl Anthony Towns has not yet. And that's a big problem. But thank you, Iceman Champ. Appreciate it. Andrew P. Andrew says, is he the right coach to maximize this offense? I mean, you could say he's not the right coach. I can counter that by saying, well, they're second best offense by cleaning the glasses standards right now in the NBA. You can counter back with, well, sure, but when he has to go up against the Celtics or the Rockets or the Thunder, it's not the same offense. It's not a great offense then. So if we're trying to win a championship, then what are we doing here? And I think that's a fair and reasonable take. I think this is more of a player-driven issue. Like, I don't know what the alternative here, like what a different coach would do to unleash Karl Anthony Towns against this particular defense. The in vogue way of having your skilled, high skilled big on an offense perform is to have him handle the ball in a more high volume way. You've seen it with Jaren Jackson Jr. You've seen it with Mobley. You saw it a lot with Dallas, with Anthony Davis, having him handle the ball more, having guards screen for bigs. It's another way you could do that. I don't think Cat has that level of passing ball handling to tap into. I think he's limited. I think he's a little too limited. He's highly skilled, of course, but I think for those players that have really flourished in that specific way, I don't think you can expect Cat to perform in that manner. So I'm trying to process, like, where's the difference? What would a new coach do to make Cat a great player against these teams? I think it's just a tough question to answer, but I don't think it's a coaching issue. I think it's a Cat has to be better issue. Where the coach could help is to just go maximum spacing, and give him as much room to operate as possible. Like, you could do that. I don't think that would have a huge impact on the offense. I don't think it would have a big impact on Cat's individual offense, because I don't think the big problem still presents itself. They're still going to figure out a way to switch every Brunson Cat pick and roll. They're still going to put wings on Cat. All those things are going to be there. Yes, the driving gaps get a little wider. Maybe there's more space to operate. But again, you're still dealing with the problem, how to attack it. And if whether it's a post up or a pick and roll situation where you're trying to generate some advantage, like all those issues still are there. And if you're improving them on the margins, I can understand that perspective and agree with that potential, but I don't think it changes things at a level needed to bridge the gap that needs to be bridged. And that is why I don't think this is a Tom Thibodeau problem. I think it's fair to say he has not been good enough against these teams. But if I'm going to list out where I put the onus and where I think the problems lie, like I just don't think I think he's a piece of the pie, but I think it's a small slice I think the bigger slice is that the players and Karl Anthony Towns specifically just has to be better. Thank you, Andrew P. Jason M. Thank you, Jason. You guys are awesome. Thank you so much. Tibbs needs to use the rest of this season to get Cat comfortable switching on D and posting up on O. That will be the most important thing in the playoffs. Yeah, so switching on D, we've seen it a few times. I think he looks fine. I think he actually holds up pretty well. I think it's, if I had to compare his individual switching defense versus him guarding either in drop or hedging out, I probably do have more confidence that he can hold up more just switching it. But a guy that we have seen the foul problems, we've seen those issues come up. Like, can you really go to that in a game, in a playoff game, and that be your base defense? I'm just highly skeptical that could be the case. I think it needs to be a option, whether it's plan B or C. Like, I think having it as an option to throw teams off, to utilize for a few possessions, I think it's certainly something they need to use more of. I don't think it should be the primary pick and roll defense, because I don't think he would hold up, to be completely frank with you, over a long stretch. And then, yeah, posting up needs to punish teams. If they're going to put a wing on you, like, punish them. And I thought in the most recent Houston game, like, his production didn't generate elite offense, but I thought his mindset was strong. It seemed like he was more cognizant of getting deep post position and going through them. And it helped certainly that the Rockets were just a little bit more slender than your typical team. Like, they don't have Lou Dort. They don't have some of these, like, bigger, brawnier players. Like, there was many possessions where Amen Thompson just couldn't handle Cat in the post, and the Knicks were able to take advantage of that. So that might have been part of the equation there, but the mindset overall was really strong in that game, and he didn't have that same mindset against Boston, but it just needs to be the mindset when teams are putting smalls on him. Thank you, Jason. Really appreciate it. Mr. L, thank you so much for checking in. And we traded away our identity, rebounding and grit. Cat needs to be paired with a Miles Turner type in order for us to beat the Celtics. We have issues. Well, the identity thing has been changed. I agree with you. I still like this team more. I think the ceiling's obviously much higher, and I do think there's probably another level they can get to maybe next season with more pieces around them. But I think the rebounding overall has been really strong, and their offensive rebounding actually has been trending upwards. I think they're probably in the top 10 right now, and they were not in the early part of the year. So that number keeps rising, and their defensive rebounding has been a strength all season long. So that's part of it. But yeah, I mean, the identity of that team last year is just not the same, but that team last year wasn't beating the Celtics team either. So that's the part that I'm trying to reckon with. Like, there's the ceiling of this team is certainly higher, but against certain teams, they just seems like some of the same. You have these big, huge problems that the team would have against the Celtics last year. You have different problems this year, but they're just as potentially crippling to your performance against them. And that's the problem. And then regarding Miles Turner, you can't really get him because of the fact that they don't have the assets, they can't sign him in free agency. But certainly a guy like that would be amazing with Cat, but unfortunately not an attainable option for them to pair with Cat. We'll see what Mitchell Robinson is able to do. I do like the fact that he is dropped weight. He looks slimmer. I think after that first foot injury he had in the 1920 season, he came back the following year. It was just like much bigger, almost sort of leaned into the muscle adding aspect to it, and it just didn't look as good. And then 23, 24, like that season, it seemed like he was at like the perfect weight, had almost a lot of the athleticism had still remained, but was able to add all this like real strength without all the extra weight. So if we can get back to like that version of Mitch in terms of the athleticism, that would be huge for this team. And he's still 26 years old, so maybe the injuries are not going to weaken his athleticism too much. I think we have to expect some depreciation there in terms of how he's able to move around. But if he can be 85% the athlete he once was, it's still a very effective player, and one I'm very, very interested to see play with Karl Anthony Towns, see how those two work. All right. Thank you, Mr. L. Appreciate you checking in with us. Richard Robertson just donating to the group. I really appreciate that. And then he gets it right the second time. Thank you so much, Richard. Why did ATL beat the Celtics twice? Well, one, they have a lot of wings. They have a lot of options to sort of stay out of rotation. They're a high level athletic team, and Trae Young can be a handful. And you put all those things together, and they can win these games. We've seen the Hawks against the Knicks a couple times to really give them problems with their athleticism, and their wing depth is real, and Dyson Daniels is legit. So they can do things against the Celtics that the Knicks are just, the Knicks would have to win in a different way. But the Hawks, and it's been the thing about the Hawks for years now, when they can tap into this certain level, like they can beat anyone. They're a really confounding team in some ways, because their ceiling is pretty high, but they just are so inconsistent that you can't ever rely on them. They just happen to have like really strong games against the Celtics, and they have some athletic traits that make it tough on the Celtics. Thank you, Richard. And I think you have a handful more. Celtics lost 16 games. Why can't the Knicks beat them? It's good. It's actually a really interesting question. I think there's a level to the Celtics being a little stale this year. I don't want to say bored, but it felt like when they were going through their, struggles, relative struggles, and last month, it felt like they were just gonna eventually come out of it. That they needed a challenge. They clearly have a level that they can get to that the Knicks are just unable to reach. So Madison Square Garden, a team vying to get to where you are, like it has all the things wrapped in to give the Celtics the edge to play like a playoff level basketball game. I think that's what you saw in many of those 16 losses. They just didn't play at a level required in terms of effort and seriousness. But against the Knicks, that'll never be a problem for them, because the Knicks bring that out of them. Thank you, Richard. You got some more here. We got Cat because Randall wouldn't agree to an extension. Yeah, I think that's certainly part of it. I also know that Cat was the dream for many, several years now. So there's that piece of it. I don't know, and I don't think we've gotten great reporting on like how far apart. I know they were far apart, but how far apart the Knicks were with Randall and what number the Knicks would have been comfortable agreeing with Randall, because you had the second apron issues and long-term team building problems that would have presented itself. But yeah, it's how the team would look with Randall playing with basically no center on the roster. I can't even. It's like it's too late in the night to contemplate that. But again, as much as Cat can be frustrating, as much as Cat was really, really bad tonight, big picture, like he's been incredible and all NBA, all-star starter, like everything you could have asked for, he's been. He just hasn't been that guy against these teams, and it's a real problem, but it's fair to also acknowledge the greatness that he's had on the offensive end this season. It's been real. Thank you, Richard. DJ, we still got a better team than last year. Yes, 100%. The Knicks are better than they were last year. Question is, are they better against the Celtics than they were last year? You lose 132 to 109 and 131 to 104 in 2 games. And you can't sugarcoat that. And you're going to have to go through them in the playoffs. So you get them a couple more times, you can flip the switch, you figure out ways to play better. The Brunson guarding in space, keeping yourself out of rotation, suppress the threes. Those are positives coming out of this game. So you lean on that, and you have that at least to hang your head on going forward. Thank you, Richard. Cat is a better defender and player than Randall. I think he's a better defender overall, and he's a better defender because he's a great defensive rebounder, and he's just a huge human that is a deterrent just by the space he occupies. So, yeah, he is 100% a better overall defender than Randall, who's, limited by length, effort, and awareness and all those things. Could guard in the post is high level, guard in space really well. But yeah, I think Cat's a better defender, and he's a better player. I don't think we need to debate that. There's no doubt. Knicks are better with Cat than they were with Randall. 100%. And Richard again, Celts have been building their team for 5 to 6 years. Yeah, and they've been playing together for a couple of years now, and they have all that chemistry, all those reps and possessions. They are a well-oiled machine is almost doing them disservice. But that's what they are, and you combine that with the coaching and the talent level, and they're a monumental mountain to overcome right now. Beyond Cleveland. Despite the regular season record, like this Boston team, when they are locked in, man, they're not, you talk about weak points. Like, where are the weak points on the Celtics? How many times you go into games, any team, where you just, all right, well, the Celtics, will this be the night they only make 10 threes? Or 15 threes, whatever the number is. Is this the night they're just like, 80% effort tonight, not going all out, not, kind of going to play a little loose with the ball. That's what you're hoping for. Because if you're waiting on them to be at their best and you have to be at your best, man, it's a tough ask for anyone. And that's Thunder included. That's how highly I think of the Celtics. They are just so many options on both sides of the floor. Tatum is incredible as a two-way player. the Porzingis factor, and then it's like Derek White can hit 7 threes in a night. 6th man of the year coming off the bench. Multiple backup centers that can play well. And then Jaylen Brown can give you 40 in a playoff game. Like, there's just so many weapons. Little overwhelming to think about in terms of like how you beat that in a 7-game series. Thank you, Richard. Matt S., thank you so much for checking in at this hour with us. This is year 1 of Cat JB and year 1.5 of OG versus year 8 of JB Tatum. 100% correct. To take a leap, need bench scoring of our 18 losses. Our 18 losses by an average of 12 points per game. I assume that's bench scoring in the 18 losses at 12 points per game. Yeah, just to take that last point, you need more punch off the bench. And Cameron Payne has been really good. I think more than what you could have asked for shooting the basketball, but there's limitations, inconsistencies there. Deuce McBride just not shooting like he was last year. Like, he's not a 40% shooter this year. That's a real difference. So when you are a 40% high volume 3-point shooter, and now and I'm going to get this won't have today listed here. Hold on one second. Because when you're a 40% 3-point shooter on high volume and you're now 36%, that's a real change and a real difference. And as I said earlier, like, his mere presence on the court is a big benefit. So 41% last year, and he's at 36% this year, not including tonight. So like, that's a sizable drop. And because he is so important to how the bench is able to generate offense, like, you're feeling it. You're feeling all the missed layups. Shot 68% at the rim last year, shooting 48% this year. In a perfect world, he's not your number one, your 6-man guy you rely on to generate all that offense. But he is right now for the Knicks. So when he's had some regression almost across the board on offense, like, it's being felt. It's not to say he's not a really good player, and his defense keeps him at a high level, and his spacing keeps him at a high level. But 6th man of the year was talked about. That was a real conversation before the year, like him getting to that level, and he's just not even in the ballpark right now. And all the times that Tatum and Brown have played together, those 8 years that you talked about, and comparing that to the Knicks, like, yes, I've touched on that a few times. You are 100% correct, Matt. That's a huge advantage to have that camaraderie and chemistry with a teammate, and to have Derek White now for several seasons. Porzingis, they know it all. They know sort of like the flow of the offense. Like, when they're out of their typical sets and they're just in random flow offense, like, they still are producing high quality looks because they've played together so often. So they don't have to run specific sets against specific coverage game after game, possession after possession. They can just be in their, like, you flow random offense, whatever you want to call it, and still generate the looks and the 3-point volume. It's what makes them great. Most teams, when they're in random offense, they can struggle. It's not the Celtics. It's because they played together for so long. Thank you, Matt. And I believe that was it for today. Thank you so much for everyone checking out the show. Thank you for tuning in. That was the KFS Postgame Show presented by BetUS. Of course, like this video, subscribe to the channel, leave a 5-star rating wherever you are listening or viewing, whether it's on our pods, on our or on the YouTube. Please, helps us out a lot. And thank you, Kevin, for hanging out with me this evening. Tough loss, but we have a couple more games before the All-Star break, and we'll enjoy those and get a little break here before we get to the second half of the season. But until then, we'll see you guys later. Thank you.